when the enemy whispers accusations to bring separation, division. Often pastors and intercessors find more to divide than to unite and go their own ways. But too much is at stake to let old conflicts and differences continue. Much will be lost if breaches are not healed, so that both may fulfill the calling of God. The benefits of the pastor and the intercessor working together are immeasurable. During seasons of blessing and harvest, as well as seasons of darkness and trial, through storm and through sunshine, this divinely arranged connection furthers God's plan. Who is your Sam? Who is your Frodo? Will you take your place in this hour? The hour is later than you think.
I just love that clip so much because if you're Lord of the Rings fans, Frodo could never have completed his mission if it wasn't for Sam. And we believe the same is true with pastors and intercessors, leaders and intercessors, to be able to move forward. And I just want to say that this is the primary usage that we have seen this done, but it can be done for causes or for regions. And so just take what we're saying and apply it to however God chooses to uniquely use it here. But I encourage you, if you are a leader, a key leader, a pastor, to consider having one of these teams around you because they're so very powerful. The pastors and leaders that we have talked to, they said it's the difference between night and day. Some people say, well, I have people who are praying for me, I send emails out every once in a while, but it's the difference between having, the army pray for you and having a strategic team, a SEAL team. And so we'll see as we go through what that means. So I want to say what this strategic intercession is not. Sometimes people think, oh, well, cool, we're going to increase prayer, we're going to increase intercession. Now, everything's going to go wonderfully, right? Everybody's going to live happily ever after and so on. But that's not what this is about. This is not about making a cushy life for your pastor or leader. This model is about advancing God's kingdom. When God's kingdom is being advanced, does the enemy roll over and play dead? No, he does not. And so there is an increase in the warfare. But this model that we're going to share with you today protects the intercessors, and you're doing it as a team, and really overcomes a lot of that. And so if you're ready for an adventure, if you are trusting God in the warfare, and you want to see God's kingdom advanced, then this model is for you.
So we have a lot of statistics here, and we actually had another one that we started with usually, but we took it out because as we continued to dig in a little deeper trying to verify the numbers, we couldn't verify them. But the numbers had stated that there were about 1,500 to 1,700 pastors that were leaving the ministry every month. Now, that amount may sound like a lot, but there's 1,200 churches just in the Sacramento region. So when you think of that, and then you look at this other statistic here, right here, 65% have thought about quitting the ministry in the last 30 days. That's quite a number. That's a lot. So when you put that in perspective with the nation, it could be 1,500 to 1,700 pastors that are leaving every month. But the reason is because they're targeted. Now, one of the reasons I left the Seventh-day Adventist Church was because I burned out. I burned out and I did a face plant. And I believe if I had one of these teams around me, I don't believe I would have done that. However, God's plan is always better than ours, right? And so he had a reason for getting me to that place where I'd be in a place where I'd be open to leaving. Because being part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, for me, meant that I had all the truth, and that eventually everyone would come to that truth and know and understand everything the way I understood it. It was a huge disillusionment when I stepped out and realized, oh, that's not quite correct. There are other ways to interpret the Bible. Wow, imagine that. So anyway, this has been really powerful for us to understand that it's needed. It's so needed, and especially in the arena where you step into businesses, you step into government, and then as my wife was mentioning, this could be a cause. So you could come around a region with a prayer team. Same concept. You come around the region, you begin to pray into the prayer team, and the idea that we'll look at here in a little bit is that there's always somebody fasting and praying. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that is one of the biggest keys to this whole thing, is there's always somebody that is fasting and praying, and it takes it to a whole new level. So we understand that strategy is needed when we are in war. Strategy is needed when we play games. So why wouldn't we use strategy in the spiritual? So we want to understand that strategy is vital, it's important. So I'm going to show you another video. And in this video, this is taken out of a movie I wouldn't highly recommend. It's called The Eagle. But it's a Roman, it's about Romans conquering the land and so forth. And in this one scene, just before this, the Romans had gone out, they'd had a battle during the day, and they inadvertently left a few of their men out there. And so now they're going back out to get these men, and they're sending one small platoon out there to get them, while their whole barbarian army is coming at them. So I want you to watch this and look at the differences. What are the differences? What are the things that these two armies have? Number one, look for what they have in common, and then look for what they have that is different, what sets them apart. Okay, so watch this. Hopefully we can see it well, and we'll ask some questions afterwards. Here we go. That's the last video we're going to have a while, so we don't have to keep playing with the lights. But so what are some of the things that you saw between the two armies that they had in common? So keep it for what they have in common. What do they have in common?
Courage.
Courage.
Weaponry.
They all had weapons. What else?
Determination.
Determination.
Strategy.
Leaders.
Somewhat. Each other?
Protection.
Okay. And they protection. So I'm going to come back now. So these are things that we were looking at that they have in common. Now the Romans had shields, but the barbarians had shields also, but they didn't use them in the same way, right? Okay, so what do they have that really set them apart? What are the differences that you saw?
They were together and had a strategy and a plan that they stuck to.
Okay, so the Romans had strategy, they had plan, they knew what they were doing, they were training. Okay?
What training?
They had a whole different way of fighting.
Whole different way of fighting, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay?
It's communication.
Communication, and that is probably one of the biggest ones we're going to look at here in a little bit. That is key. All right, what else?
The swords.
Swords. They had swords that were better designed, better equipment,
Well, they had a leader too.
and they had clear leadership.
Yeah.
Clear leadership. So, and the other thing too is how did the Romans used their shields together. They guarded one another. So they weren't just guarding themselves, they were setting up to guard one another. So they worked as a group, as a whole. And so that was one of the keys as well. So we understand that strategy is important. So we want to make sure, where we're at here, we just want to make sure that we're using strategy when we move forward in the spiritual. And as my wife said, it is one thing to have an army that prays for you, intercessors, where you just send the word out and everybody's praying for you. That's powerful. But when you understand how these SEAL teams work and how they're able to move in and surgically hit things, then it becomes something totally different, totally new. And especially when you're looking at leaders, and then when you're looking at a region, how do you surgically go in to do something that an army of intercessors may not necessarily be able to accomplish in the same way. So there's different places and different functions of these different prayer teams. Okay?
So just to give you some history, where this model originated from is in Kenya, Africa. There was a region that was known as the graveyard of pastors and missionaries. And different groups would go in there and they would just immediately have that opposition. There was a lot of violence, witchcraft, all kinds of stuff going on. And they would end up leaving within a couple months, broken, discouraged, depressed, all of those kinds of things. And so finally a pastor came in with a team of intercessors. And they tried a lot of different things. They did all-night prayer and worship. They did all kinds of different things, but they were getting hammered. And so finally in desperation, the pastor asked each one of the intercessors to take a day of the week to fast and pray for him and for the ministry. And as soon as they did that, they began to feel some headway, but then the intercessors began to be picked off one by one. And so the Lord gave that pastor this strategy that covers the intercessors while they're fasting and praying. And as soon as they did this, the witchcraft was totally broken in that community. The witch left town. Today it's flourishing. They have a Bible college and a number of churches, and it's been incredible. And so how it works is every day one person is fasting and praying, and 2 teammates are covering them. And it may seem complicated at first, but it's not really. And so let's say my day of the week to fast and pray was Sunday. The person who prays the day before and the person who will fast and pray the next day covers me while I'm praying.
Yeah, it can sound like you got to quit your job and focus on praying, but it's really not the case. So it's more like a 3-day commitment. So the first day you're praying for a teammate, and then the second day you are fasting and praying, and we'll go into that a little bit later. And then the third day you're praying again for your teammate. So it's a 3-day commitment, but again, you're not being asked to quit your job and to focus on praying for 24 hours. And we'll explain how it looks and works here in just a little bit. But it is a commitment. There is a commitment. So we're looking for people that are willing to take at least 3 days where they are willing to pray for their teammates who, this is the best way to look at it. I like it this way anyway. Anybody here ever climb a very tall mountain? Anybody? Okay. I climbed Shasta about a year ago, right at a year ago. I climbed Shasta, and it was right after we had heavy rains, and so it's the first time. I've climbed it 3 times. And actually, I've climbed it once. I've attempted it 3 times. So I can explain that a little bit better. And this was another attempt. We got up so high, and I blamed it on. There were 3 of us, and I blamed it on one of the other guys because he did get hurt, and so we took him back down. So thank you, because it was getting tough. I was to a place where I think I'm done. But when you climb a high mountain, you go up, and so we made base camp at about 10,000 feet, and we spent the night there. And that's to get acclimated. So when you're in this rotation cycle, you're coming to that place where you're going to be up on the summit the next day. But before you go up to the summit, you're getting acclimated. You're praying for the person who's up on the summit. Now, on the summit of Shasta, when we were climbing it, it was 21 below zero.
What?
The wind chill was 21 below zero. So it was cold. I was not really looking forward to getting up there. So in the spirit realm, when you are the one that's praying and fasting over the leader or over the region, whatever it is you're praying for, you're going to be getting hammered by the spiritual elements because you're standing in that place, you're standing in that gap, and you are now covering that person, or you're covering the area. And so you're the one that's exposed to all those elements. You can expect to kind of get some warfare while you're there. That's why you've got 2 teammates who are on each side of you that are, in the process of praying for you. Let me go back, I'm not sure, there we go. But they're praying for you. The people on the base camp, they're the ones praying for you and covering you. So that's the idea, so that you're not getting picked off. You're not getting taken out because you've got other teammates who are praying and covering you. So it's not just about the leader. It's not just about the region or the subject that you're praying for. But you are a family, just like those Roman warriors come out together. You are together, and you're fighting together. and you're covering one another, but you know you've got somebody that's on that peak every single day who's taking the elements and you're covering them. So it's a great model to bring everybody around and bring them together. So the intercessors sometimes you have felt in the past expendable. They're not. They're not. And we need to make sure that we're covering one another in these processes so that everybody can have a long, healthy life and continue praying because you're needed. We are all needed in this war. So that's the idea, is that the 3-day commitment, and the first day you're in the base camp, you're praying for someone on the top. The next day you're on the top, and those two people are praying for you. Then you come back down, and you're still praying for the person that comes up on that peak behind you, and then you're off the rotation. I mean, you're not off the rotation, you're off that 3-day commitment, but you're still in the rotation until it comes back around again. Yes?
Actually, this is Aaron and her
Yes.
holding Moses' hand.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Very good.
So you can use this model with just 7 people covering each day of the week. The only challenge to that is what happens if somebody gets sick, goes on vacation, moves out of the area, then you've got a hole. And so we found that the ideal size of team is around 12 people. And so those extra people can be alternates. Because some people might say, I don't know if I want to do the fasting every week, but maybe I could do it, every once in a while. One of the teams that I lead, we have 2 people who rotate every other Saturday, and we have 4 people who rotate on Sunday. Because if you think about it, if your day to fast is Sunday, every Sunday, that's usually a family day, that's, church day, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it can be heavy to do that every week. And so that just kind of lightens the load and spreads it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, but some churches have a hard time finding just 7 people, and sometimes you just have 6 people or 5 people, and you go with whatever amount you have, and you trust Jesus to cover any days that you can't. And so this has been such a powerful model to use wherever we have gone and taught this. Now, you may be wondering, well, okay, who am I going to have on this team? Who is an intercessor? And a lot of times we look for people who are, the long prayers that are at every prayer meeting and so passionate, and we think that's an intercessor. And oftentimes we disqualify. For a long time, I didn't think I was an intercessor, and I'll share a little bit more on that later. But an intercessor is just somebody who prays for something or someone outside of themselves.
That's right.
It's not a gift or an office in Scripture. And I believe that's very intentional because all believers are called to be intercessors.
There you go.
Amen.
And so when we isolate them, those are the intercessors, we lose half of our army, and we can't do that. And so we need to understand all of us are called to be intercessors in some form, in some capacity. Now, some may be more committed to that as a role or as their life, but all of us are intercessors. When Paul was writing to the church, he didn't say, hey, get the intercessors to pray for me. He said, pray for me. Because he knew how important it was.
Okay, we're going to hand out a piece of paper. Actually, let me put one of those. Does everybody have a pen? Do you have something that you can write with? Okay, this has 2 sides on it. I'm going to ask you just to look at the side that says, what type of intercessor are you? Just look at that side. Don't flip it over just yet. And we're going to take a minute. And what I want you to do with that is, we'll take probably 2 or 3 minutes. I'll let you go through this. Circle the words on that page that jump out, that resonate with your spirit. So don't spend a lot of time on it. Just circle the words that resonate with your spirit. And we'll give you just a few minutes to do that.
In all 4 boxes?
Yes. Yeah, in all 4 boxes. Okay, so don't jump over to the scoring just yet. We're going to do that a little bit later. Anybody else need any more time? Raise your hand if you need more time. Okay, we'll. Did we have enough of these for everybody? Did everybody get one? All right, don't overthink it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on. We don't, again, don't want to spend too much time on it, just because we just want those words that jump out at you. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do is look at the next section, which is the different types of intercessors. And you've all heard of the different types of personalities, right? The phlegmatic and melancholy, and then there's so many different types. Well, this kind of helps put these into categories for you as an intercessor. So the first intercessor that we're looking at is the warrior intercessor. Now this is the one that when we look at it, we tend to think that this is the only type of intercessor. These are the type of people that when you're in a group, they'll get a hold of the mic and they'll start praying. And when they're praying, they will just keep going and going and going and going, and they get louder and louder and louder and louder, and they just be, wow, it's just fascinating to watch them. But then if you're not a warrior intercessor, it can be really difficult to want to stand up behind them and want to pray, right? We were actually part of a, what's that? What the? I thought that when, actually I thought you said something there, but you didn't say anything?
I kind of laughed.
Oh, that was you. All right, okay. I'm looking at Ron. Ron, what'd you say? All right, but to understand that when a warrior intercessor is praying, it can be really difficult to follow them. We went to a church in downtown Sacramento for probably 4 or 5 weeks, and they invited us down there to teach. So we're going down there to teach, and when we arrived, we realized, oh my goodness, this is a whole house full of warrior intercessors, because they're all praying, and the intensity is way up here, and just going, 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 and then they hand the mic to us, and the intensity goes, whoop. Like, oh. But you know, God still hears those prayers. He hears these prayers just as, you know, it doesn't matter how loud you are when you're praying. It's more about what's coming from the heart.
That's right.
And so the warrior intercessor can be very powerful, but they can also be intimidating. And they have to understand that. So if you are a warrior intercessor, you want to be aware of that and know that at times you need to just kind of step back. Because the warrior intercessor can also be somebody that's praying, and they will pull everything out of the heavens that there is to pray over a situation. You know what I mean? You kind of know what I'm talking about? It's like you can be standing in a circle and you're waiting to pray, but the warrior intercessor is just praying and praying, and you're thinking, oh, I'll pray that. And all of a sudden, boom, they pray it. Oh, okay, well, I'll pray that. And then boom, they pray it. It's like, all right, come on. You're not leaving anything for me to pray here. So you're wondering, what am I going to pray when the warrior intercessor is done? Well, that's one of the things, again, because if you're a warrior intercessor, know when to rest. Step back. Pray, and then let somebody else pray. It's understanding that you are a warrior, and that's okay, but your weakness is that you're going to tend to intimidate, and you're going to tend to just keep right on going and going and going and going when there's other people that want to pray.
That's right.
So we have to understand to step back if you're a warrior intercessor. Nothing wrong with a warrior intercessor, but we just have to understand when it's time to step back.
All right, the next one is the watchman intercessor, or you could also say the prophetic intercessor. And the strengths of these ones are they're alert to danger, they have great discernment, and they're out there looking to see what is the enemy doing, what is the Father doing. And so they're great for strategy, understanding what's going on, what's coming up, what we need to do for the battle. Now, the weaknesses are they can tend to be kind of loners, and sometimes they're kind of off up in the watchtower, and often misunderstood by everybody else. Maybe thought of those kind of weird people out there. And then part of the weakness for them is, this is where some of the biggest breaches happen between pastors and intercessors, is where watchmen will come and go, the enemy is trying to do this, pastor, you have to do this, you have to. And they try to get the pastor to do something because of what they've seen. And if the pastor doesn't do something immediately, then they're right back, knocking on his door, calling him, pastor, you need to do this, you need to do this. And what happens is eventually it builds a wall, because the pastor is going, I don't know what to do with this. And they start building that wall, and the watchman tends to be like, well, I'm just going to go somewhere else where my gift is going to be appreciated. And they tend to go from place to place. It's important to understand, if you are a watchman or a prophetic intercessor, the intel that you get is so vital. But your primary purpose is to pray it.
That's right.
If the Lord reveals it to you to share with your pastor, you share it once. You have done your job, and you are released from the Lord. It is the pastor's responsibility from then on out. And so just want to encourage you. I made a lot of mistakes early on in intercession, and I was one of those who were, Pastor. I have so repented since then. But God is gracious. And so just encourage you.
Okay, and then the next one is the scribe or the list intercessor. Now, is this on or does it need to be on? Do you need it?
I'm
It is on?
appreciating it.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure. And so the scribe or list intercessor is very detail oriented. They're very thorough, and you really need to have one of these on your team because they're the administrative type. They're the one that brings everything together and makes sure that everybody stays in line and moving forward. But the weaknesses is they can get so tangled up in their list that they lack the flow of the Spirit and they miss out on the relational part. And that's a key because we don't understand sometimes what is happening in the Spirit. And when the list intercessor is in charge, they want to go through their list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they may get down to 1 or 2, and then the whole team, if you're in a group, tends to move on with the flow of the Spirit, and they may just drop down to number 5 or 6, and the list intercessor's freaking out because it didn't go 3, 4, and 5. And that's the drawback of the list intercessor. They need to sometimes be willing to let go of their control so that they can flow with the rest of the people. We had a list intercessor where we did a 24-hour deal at the Rock of Roseville, and the last group that was going to be in place to have a 2-hour slot was JOCO, or Joseph Company. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's a group of intercessors, but they're business. They're all in business. And so you can imagine they were more of the list and the scribe type of intercessors. And so the leader comes to me, and we're about to step up for our 2-hour session, the last 2 hours, and she's like, we're a half hour behind. What do I do? What do I do? And she had this whole list of things that they wanted to do in their 2-hour session because it now was out of sync, and they were the whole thing after 24 hours was, a half hour off. And she's freaking out because this list, how is she going to get through the list that she had? And I'm like, it's okay, just flow with the Spirit. And anyway, it was just funny to me to see someone step in. I know of list intercessors. Pastor Francis, the person that started this whole thing and getting it moving in the region, his mother was a list intercessor, extreme list intercessor. She had 2 books. And he tells this story.